My name is Joe Smoke, and I'm the Director of Grant Programs at the Department of Cultural Affairs. I've worked at DCA for 26 years, and I'm one of the founders of this program. We're very lucky to live in a city like Los Angeles that still funds individual artists, independent artists directly. Most government agencies only fund nonprofits in the model of the NEA. And so we're pleased that this program is now entering its 27th or 28th iteration. My goal today as the facilitator of the meeting is to read the text that highlights some of the text in the grant proposal. I'm going to assume that you're going to read it all, but I'm going to cover the things that I've highlighted in green, which I believe are the most important things. And my goal along the way is to help you with strategy and not just instructions. So that will be the benefit of attending today and listening to the advice that follows the instructions. We'll stop at the end of every page or 2 pages to answer questions so you don't have to hold them for very long. And Ben knows the guidelines. So if he defers your question for 10 or 15 minutes, is because it belongs in a future section and we'll go over it at that time. All right, Ben, you ready to roll?
Let's go.
All right. So in my message to all of the potential applicants, I'm introducing the 2 linked programs, which is the COLA-IMAP program, which stands for Independent Master Artist Project Program, and it is linked to a Cultural Trailblazers program. The panelists that meet to select one will also select the other. We're looking to fund a spectrum of mid-career literary, performing, and visual artists who intend to create solo works between the fall of 25 and 26. So if you are a solo artist, this is the right place for you. If you only present in groups, then you can listen for the next 3 pages and then log off, because we have other programs for groups, but this is not one of them. So the COLA-IMAP grants are, again, support things that are solo. And within solo, we do not fund things that are interactive with the public, things that are interactive with other artists, things that are collaborative in nature, where you're working with another artist of your own selection, or that you propose something that is site-specific in a place selected by you. And that includes the outside of the Barnsdall Gallery or any other place that you decide you want to show. The purpose of this grant is for you to produce a body of work that we can preview in your studio, select portions of, and present where we would want to present you. And there will be 2 group exhibitions, one at the Los Angeles Municipal Art Gallery for all the people who make design and visual arts, and there'll be one showcase at Grand Performances at California Plaza in downtown LA for the people who present work live, literary, performing artists in particular will present their work on a stage. Both are group exhibitions, and in both cases, the curators will select the portions of the work you produce that they would like to premiere. So if this doesn't fit you because you are a social practice artist or you do things with other artists, we have another category called NEAR, Neighborhood Engagement Artist Residency, where you can select people to work with, up to 20 people. You can do 11 workshops and then culminate your project in a venue of your choice. So NEAR provides all the opportunities that COLA-IMAP does not. We also want you to think today about a project that has restraints, that is not too overly complicated, because we do need to see it in your studio or to preview it in order to know how it's going to be installed or presented by the city of Los Angeles. So this would not be a grant for you to do something that's very unrestrained, very expensive, very complicated, because we won't know how to put you in a group show if we can't see it in your studio. And we're also asking you, if you're a design visual artist, to really think about, nothing larger than 12 feet, or 30 minutes in length, simply because it is a group exhibition and we don't have an unlimited amount of space. Can we go to the next page, Ben? There's one more thing on the bottom there. I'm sorry. Yeah. So in addition to drafting your proposal in the next couple of weeks, you also want to reach out to people who are leaders in your field, academics, curators, or colleagues, and have them write you a letter of recommendation. And please note that these letters should be supplemental to what you say about yourself in your proposal. So the worst thing you could do is to script somebody and tell them what to say about you if it's the exact same thing you're saying in your proposal, because then there's no value added. So please reach out to a couple people, have them write a letter that recommends you for this honor and presumably talks about the benefits of your past work and your new work, and then let them go free form and choose that letter to attach to your proposal if you agree that it's great and adds value. And if it doesn't, go get more letters. Better for you to put something on the end that is new information rather than duplicative, and also to put something on the end of your proposal that's hot, hot, hot and not lukewarm, because it's the last thing the panelists read before they go to their score sheets. So we do have this one option open here if you are a duo. So let's say you're a dancer who's worked with a partner for many years, and the two of you choreograph yourselves as a duo, and you can apply as a duo. We don't mind if your combined resume meets all of the qualifications of the numbers of years and the quality of work. So please know that the duo status is open in any field, but it's up to you to show us a resume and materials that qualifies you as if you were getting one grant to use between the two of you. All right. If there aren't any questions, Ben, I'm going to go to the bottom of this page and talk about the framework of the guidelines, the instructions.
No questions at the moment. So if folks have questions, feel free to type into the chat and or to raise a hand, and we can invite you to unmute yourself. But not seeing any at the moment, I say we go on.
All right. So the grant is very simple. I know that artists aren't taught grant writing in most universities and business schools, but truly this is a very simple grant. It is an artist statement, what we call the introductory text, and we have a wide lens on how you can create that. It's a narrative of a half a page to focus on what you can do in 8 months with about $6,000 to $8,000. So that's your project narrative. It's your resume, and please don't forget to customize your resume, because the most important thing we do when we open your proposal is count that you have 15 years of experience. Unless you're a dancer, dancers have the special understanding of a shorter, faster career. So we have a threshold of 8 years for a professional choreographer dancer who choreographs themselves and presents themselves in their own work. And then artistic samples, which we'll go over for you. Recent items only. Please don't try to show us 15 years in your sample material. That's not the purpose of the samples. The resume establishes you have 15 years, and the samples shows us where you're at today in your work. And we want the best work examples first. So if you're putting in 10 images, you don't save the best one for last. You put it first and second, okay? And we'll go over that again. And then supplementary materials, again, you'll hear me say this many times, add value to the information that you have written. The purpose of all the supplementary materials is to give us another voice about you. The entire proposal is defined. You are writing about yourself and telling us the facts of your career. And the supplementary materials is an opportunity for us to hear another voice who believes that you have an important position in the city of Los Angeles or in your field. The fellowship payments are dispersed over 4 installments. It's important that you notice this before you apply. It's another reason why we ask you not to make something that's very complicated or very unrestrained, because you will not be getting all the money up front. You get the money over the benchmarks of us visiting you in your studio, seeing what you're making, seeing what you're photographing for the catalog, and then delivering to the final program. So please also think about feasibility, because the money is not a lump sum at the front end. So you need to pace the work over the 8 months. And lastly, the trailblazers that are selected by the panel are also given a stipend, and they are producing work on our website. So it may very well be, as always the case, that the panel loves 20 artists and we only have enough funding for 10. So there will be Trailblazer Awards for people who we really think are outstanding. We just don't have enough money for full fellowships for those folks. And then we will ask you to present a smaller version of your project on the DCA website and promote you throughout the year. So the two programs are linked so that the panelists can choose more, because that's almost always their methodology. Once we give them the instruction to look at a spectrum of talent and to choose outside of any theme and outside of any one movement or genre, immediately they have more choices than we can afford. And therefore we have this other way of saying, hey, you got a Cultural Trailblazer Award, which means the panel really respected your proposal. And we really want you to do that new project that you told us about, and have the Department of Cultural Affairs have an opportunity to promote it on our website. If we can scroll down, Ben.
Sure.
Get to the next green section. Eligibility, all right. So if you are applying to this grant, you are a master of self-involved ideas. You are not a curator of other artists. You are not a presenter of other people's ideas, and you are not an interpreter of other people's ideas. So this would not be the grant for somebody who's a performing artist who's going to perform Shakespeare. This is a grant for somebody who's a performing artist who writes and performs their own solo, their own unique work. And also, you artists who have primarily built their credentials in this same field. So if you're a musician and you've only ever performed in a band, and you've done very few solos within your band over the past 15 years, this might not be the grant for you, because the panel won't be able to understand you as a solo composer and presenter of your own music. So again, if you're a member of a group, we love bands and ensembles and groups. We just love them in other categories. So you are submitting one proposal. You must choose to be in the design visual arts category, which includes architects, graphic designers, product designers, fashion designers. 2, you can choose to be in the literary arts category as a poet or fiction writer. Or 3, you can choose to be in the solo performing artist category, meaning you are a composer who dances their work, you are a composer of music who plays their own music, and you are a performer, solo performer in the theatrical sense of like a one-person performer. Those are the categories you choose, and we asked you to only apply one time, because those, by choosing the discipline of your one proposal, you are choosing the first round of panelists who review your proposal. So if you choose performing artist, dance and music and theater, that will be the set of panelists that reviews your work first in order to move it to the next level. If you are a multi-practicing artist, as many people are today, and you are an architect who also writes poetry, who also writes music, you must choose which one category is your best talent and apply in that one category. We don't have an opportunity for you to choose all of the above here. It's just not possible in our system, given that it's a competitive field, and we need you to apply in the place where you have the 15 years of strongest talent.
Yeah.
I
have a couple questions, Joe, related to eligibility.
Okay, let's go ahead with the questions.
Okay. One question is from Jasmine, who asks if she performs poetry and often uses musical accompaniment. Would that sort of project be considered a collaboration?
No, it sounds like she's the writer of her own poetry and she uses music in the background. These are artists who are supplementary. They're not composing the poetry, nor are they composing music for the poetry. It sounds like she's curating music in the back of the poetry. So if that's the case, that's allowable. You just have to understand in this grant category that you'll be paying those other artists to perform behind you. So that means less money for you, if that's the project you choose. So if you choose to write new poetry and choose to perform with an ensemble of musicians behind you, then you're paying those musicians. Next question.
We have another question, this one from Leticia, about visual artists who have only shown in group shows and have not had a solo show.
That doesn't matter. Yeah, as long as you are the solo creator of your work, that's totally fine. Obviously, it's better if you've had one-person shows, um, but it doesn't disqualify you at all. It just means that your work is most often seen in small segments rather than in large segments. Um, I don't see a problem with that.
Great, thanks.
All right, so I think I'm on the first part of the next page. Your resume is 15 years at a minimum in every category except for dance. And if you're a choreographer, dancer, it's 8 years. Please make your resume progressive, showing us the exhibitions, publications, and performances you've had across those years. If your career has lasted 45 years, you may want to only show us the last 20. There's no reason to show us 45 years on your resume, because once you've established 15 years of public presentations or 8 as a choreographer dancer, you've met the minimum threshold. And I believe that showing us more than 20 is just asking the panelists to read things that are not currently relevant to your career. So if your resume is super long, 10 pages, this might be a chance for you to have the panelists read less, and edit to the last 20 years maximum. COLA-IMAP cannot fund anyone who doesn't meet the minimum years of exhibitions. So please know that if you do have a gap in your career, let's say you took time off to have family for 4 years and you didn't really produce a lot, but then you picked up again, those 4 years don't count in the 15. You have to still show us 15 where you have an active career. We understand that not everything's consecutive within an artist's career, and we totally get that. So in nowhere here does it say it has to be 15 consecutive years. Lastly, individuals who've been given a grant from us before. So if you've received the COLA fellowship or the COLA-IMAP grant in the past, good for you. Move on. You've been honored, and this category is now open to people. We want to honor new artists every year. Enrolled in a degree or certificate program during the grant cycle. Probably not the best idea for you to be creating a thesis show for your graduate show at blank blank university at the same time as you're producing new work for us. It's too complicated for us to understand that you're producing 2 bodies at the same time, and one of them is for a degree and one of them is for us. We would ask that you finish your degree first and then do the COLA-IMAP project next. We do understand that, again, people go back to school and get a degree, but probably not the best thing to combine those years with a COLA grant. You will be working quite rapidly on a new body of work for us, and it may not be a good match with a degree or certificate program where you have other responsibilities. Applicants who are non-professional and produce art as a hobby. This is a very competitive category among very avant-garde artists. I don't recommend you apply to this if you just dabble in the arts as a pastime. We support that in many other ways at the Department of Cultural Affairs, but not in this category. You, again, primarily create work in an ensemble or group process. It's going to be hard for the panelists to understand that in this category, which is aimed at solo artists. And lastly, if you are someone, let's say the poet who just asked a question about, I'm going to have musicians play behind me, it is a responsibility to reach out to any musician you worked with before, or even like let's say you want to do a light show behind you, and make sure that none of those people work as full part-time employees of the city of Los Angeles. It is a major conflict of interest for us to give money to somebody who then gives money back to a city employee. It looks like nepotism. And so we do want to make sure that you understand that, if you choose an unaffiliated group of artists to support your work in a kind of background way, you're going to have to make sure that none of those people work for the city of Los Angeles, because it's very weird for the public to hear that we gave somebody money and then they gave money back to a city employee. It just brings up all sorts of complications for us about conflicts of interest. So please know that keeping it simple to yourself as a solo person is really the best way to go here. The grant amount, we'd love to say that it's larger, but it's $10,000. It's always been $10,000 to artists. You will not hear from us until next May or June, because we don't even have a budget until then. So please don't apply to us in October and then send us a New Year's message saying what happened. We're not ready for you because the city hasn't decided its next budget until June of 2025. And then we have to make contracts with everyone through July and August of next year. So quite honestly, just wait and we'll send you a letter. You won't be forgotten. Please note, in the meantime, there is a group of artists who've already gotten their grants, who are already working on projects, who will be presented and put in a catalog. So please don't be one of those angry artists that sends us an evil message saying, how dare you? You didn't even tell me whether I got it or not, and now here's these 11 people presenting their work. Those are last year's artists that have been working for 8 months on their projects. They're not the people that you're competing against here. So please have faith that we're on your team. We're the arts people in the city, and we want to support artists. And we will communicate to you the results of the competition when they're available. My screen just went blank, Ben.
Sorry.
No worries. Okay.
We have a question, Joe, regarding project eligibility.
Can we wait on that? We haven't even gotten to it yet.
Okay.
I would like to do project eligibility last because it's very personal and doesn't necessarily involve everyone here. So your project should be primarily solo in nature, although performing artists may include a small number of unaffiliated players on stage to fulfill their vision. Honorary and compensation to these players will be budgeted within your $10,000 grant. You just have to remember that COLA is not a category for groups or ensembles, and the audiences that are coming are going to expect to see you as a soloist. So if you compose for 5 trombones and you need 4 other trombone players, they will stand in the back, you will stand in the front, you will introduce work, you will be the soloist in the work, and the audience will completely understand who is the master fellow in the bunch. Let's move down to the panel process, Ben. The deadlines are there for you. Please note, this grant is an annual opportunity. So if indeed you don't have time to apply now or decide you want to wait another year for any other reason, please come back again. This opportunity is posted every September and due every October. And it's an annual grant until the city tells us they can't do it anymore. We are a government agency, so Ben and I are the facilitators of a process, but we are not the panelists. We are not the ones who grade you. We are the ones who gather a set of diverse individuals who have credentials, and they are a diverse team of people that score every proposal that's eligible and talk about the merits of the top group. So their average thoughts is where we begin. If we get 100 proposals and they have very high scores for 30 people, then we take those 30 people and we enter deep conversations about how to prioritize those 30 people. The panelists are made up of artists, master artists from our past roster, arts administrators at major institutions and important institutions in the LA area, educators in your field. So a poet who teaches poetry, a musician who teaches music, art enthusiasts. I think we can cross that off in this category. This is a very prestigious grant. We don't have just art lovers on our panels for COLA. But we do have an open pool where we get resumes from people so we can meet new people every year. By and large, the panelists are new every year. They are doing this for the first time and for one time only. And then we don't repeat the panelists because we want a fresh perspective every year. We want people to be focused on the criteria, which is accomplishments and an interesting project that is helps progress the work. Basically, the panelists score you out of 100 points, and 80 points is for your career accomplishments. So that should tell you where to focus your application. The resume is very, very important because it shows us the quality of the places where you've shown and what you've accomplished already in your career. This is a grant that's based very much on where you are already at in here. It is not an ideas competition that's based on the next category, which is the proposed project. That is only 20 points. So please wow us with some phenomenal project, thinking that that's going to overwhelm the panel. The panelists are told that past work is 3 times more important. It says my internet connection. Can you hear me, Ben?
Sound good, Joe.
Okay, sorry, I'm getting little pop-up windows that says my internet connection is shaky. So please remember that this is based on what you've already accomplished. So your resume, your statement about yourself, very, very important. The letters from somebody about why your work is important, those are important. And your past samples, very, very important. The project idea, less important. So we are looking for people who have an existing body of work, and you are against the other applicants. People often ask us, how this works. Well, it works this way. If we have, painters, then there's a lot of discussions about painting and the panelists choose the best. If we have one photographer, they judge you against the photography they know that's happening in the field. It is always a balancing act. The panelists have to choose from who's applied, but they have to choose against their knowledge of the field as well. So when you begin your project, and we'll go over the application, it's really important to have one distinct sentence that tells them who you are and what you do, and also one distinct sentence that begins each section of the proposal. So I always say to artists that this is expository writing. This is factual writing where you give us the facts of what you want to do, what you have done, and what you want to do. It is not promotional language that you're using here. You're not promoting yourself, like a product. You are actually talking about accomplishments in a factual way and talking about your work in a factual way. So an example would be, I'm an abstract painter in the tradition of blank, blank, and blank. And then that's the way I introduce myself to the panelists. I have 300 proposals. They can put me in the painting pile, and they can judge all those in one swoop rather than having to go alphabetically and bounce back and forth between sculptors and photographers and video artists, etc. So how you introduce yourself helps the panelists see how you compare to other people in the field. And then in your proposed project, you say something like, I've been working on a series of paintings in blue and I'm entering my blue period, and here's what I want to do during the grant period, these abstract paintings in blue. So the more specific you are, the better it is, because then the panelists understand your unique opportunity rather than being very vague. Being vague is never a good thing. Being multifaceted is also not a good thing here because, again, if you're a abstract painter and that's where you're applying in visual design, telling us about your music and your poetry may not be the most important use of the space in the application because the painting panel doesn't really care about music. They are not the music experts. So just keep it simple and keep it factual. These are grant writing basics, as I've underlined for you in the next section. Can we move down, Ben? Grant writing is always expository. It is meant to be a business plan. It's a boring word, but it's true. It's this is who I am. This is my expertise. This is what I intend to do with the honor and the funding. And this is what you'll get in the end 10 blue paintings to choose however many you want for the group exhibition. Our budget goes up and down, so we can't even guarantee that there'll be 8 fellows or 10 fellows or 12. We don't know what the city budget is like because our money, this Department of Cultural Affairs money, comes from tourism. It comes on a hotel tax. So if a person stays at a hotel down the street from me, and it's $100 a night, when they exit that hotel, the city collects $10 for each night they've stayed in the hotel, and the Cultural Affairs Department gets some of that tourist money. So given that we don't know how many people we're choosing, this is another reason why you have to be simple and specific about who you are, because we will have limited choices. Even if there are 10, that's usually about 10% of the number of proposals we receive. So you have to proposal and also know that this is simple and you should do it every year. You should keep applying to this grant until you receive the honor. Let's go to the next section, Ben. All right, so we're going to go over very shortly the cover page, which is very simple. It's how do we contact you, the narrative, which we also call introductory text, the attachments, your resume, your work samples. I will say up front that most people choose video clips. 40% of the people choose video clips, a 5-minute excerpt of real-time work. We don't want short edited clips. We don't want heavy narration. If you are a musician and you want to show us 2 pieces, we expect to see 2 real-time minutes of one piece and then a break and 3 real-time minutes of another piece. If you don't have performance footage that you like, you can perform for the camera in your home or studio. But we do really want to see real-time experiences, because if you put together a video collage, then immediately the panel is confused because they think you're a video artist and not a musician. And if you choose images and photos, up to 10 images, we're asking for those digital files to be sent to us in the JPEG format at 72 DPI or greater. We want to show your work to the panelists, and they will be shown in the order you send them to us. Please do not take the opportunity to put these long extended titles or captions on your work. The panelists are smart people. You have to assume if they're a curator at a major museum that they're going to understand that the piece is about pathos or the piece is about joy, and they don't need you to tell them that. We can certainly put up the title of the work and the medium and the dimensions. If that's important for you to include in your digital slide, then please do so. But anything more than that, like telling us what period of your work it comes from, or what inspired you to make it, or the meaning behind the work, is really too much for the panelists, because they don't want to be told what to think. They are extraordinarily expert people in their field, and they would rather look at the work with the cleanest possible vision rather than having you overly narrate the work. And then lastly, samples, letters of support, critical reviews, prior 2 years. You have the choice to put 3 things on the end of the proposal. Choose wisely. Do not put anything on the end that is lukewarm. A letter, if you get a lukewarm letter from somebody, don't include it. If you got a review that's not glowing, don't include it. If you are including pages from a publication where you are talked about in a group exhibition, highlight the parts that talk about you so the panelists don't need to read about 10 other artists before they get to the part about you. And that's particularly important because one of those other 10 people might be in the competition. So it's not a good idea to put in a group review and not highlight the section about you, because you could inadvertently be promoting somebody else who's also in the competitive field. So think about the supplementary material, see that it is here last because it is the thing that the panelists read last before they go to their score sheet, and know that nothing there should be duplicative, boring, lukewarm, or sort of not not hot, because basically you want them to hear something extraordinary about you in someone else's words before they turn to their score sheet. Let's go to the next section, Ben. I think it's time for us to open to questions before we go to the application itself, correct? There's our
Yes.
address. Thank you for attending a webinar. Keep going. I don't see anything in green. Oh, ramp. I'm sorry. Do they have to have a ramp number, Ben?
Not for the purposes of the application, but just do know those folks who are ultimately recommended for funding need to go through the standard City of LA contracting process, which involves for registering for a ramp account.
And ramp stands for?
Regional Alliance Marketplace for Procurement.
And basically what the city is doing, it's collecting a list of vendors, because if you apply and tell us you're a muralist, then you might get other solicitations from the city once if there's a mural competition, right? So there are keywords the city uses to find vendors. So ramp is like a marketplace of people that are interested in government contracts. And if you are approved, you will be required to get a ramp number. Right now, it's listed as optional on the application, and I think it's 5 digits, right, Ben? So
Something
people
like
can put
it might be 6, 5 or 6. Yeah.
5 or 6. You can put in 5 or 6 zeros if you're worried, but just put in 00000 for right now, because it's not an absolute requirement at this stage. But it is an indication that this is a government contract, and not an award in the sense of, someone appearing on your front porch with a big check and giving you money. There will be contract paperwork to follow if you are selected. So I think we can go to the next sections, right? Okay,
Can we
so
pause for a couple of questions, Joe?
yes. Before we go into the proposal itself, let's cover all those questions.
Sure. Okay, so the first one I have here is regarding um, eligible projects. So this might be something you cover in the narrative. But the question is, can I propose a work that has already been started? Thinking about a video or installation work that often takes more than 8 months to complete, but could be finished within 8 months if the project was in the post-production phase.
Sure. So there's a part that I should have covered earlier because I highlighted it. Read it exactly. I didn't highlight it. So here's the thing. The city of Los Angeles is paying for the premiere of a new work that has never been shown before. So if you are indeed somebody who does documentary film, long or short form, and you're telling us that as a documentary filmmaker, it takes you 11 months to make a piece, and you already know what you're working on for next year, then you describe that as your proposed project. There is no rule here that says the project can't have started before you got the grant. However, you cannot show that work before we premiere it, because that's what the grant is for you to do the finish, use the money as finishing funds and finish the work. And we also don't want any projects in COLA that are a duplication of past work. So let's say you did a one-woman show on Susan B. Anthony, in the past, and you play her and you have written a play in your own words about, why she's important. This would not be an opportunity for you to do a second version of that, because if the panelists see that you've already performed something about her, they're going to feel like this is a sort of repetition in your work and not a movement forward. Now, I will say the opposite is also true. If you are somebody who's made their career as a documentary photographer, this may not be the best opportunity for you to make your first video, because the panelists aren't choosing you as a video artist. So sometimes applicants make the mistake of going completely like, wow, if I had $8,000 and I could, take time off of my job, I'd move into video. We would expect you to already do that without us and to show us your qualifications in video before you tell us about video. And the same goes for installation art. This is a very common thing. People always say, I've been making paintings for 15 years and I finally want to make an installation. You just have to understand the jeopardy of that if you're a panelist, because there are installation artists who've been making installation for 15 years and you'll be competing against them and they'll have images of their past installations. So do choose something that's logical, logical progression of your work that is new and has never been presented before, but that is also something that the government can trust that you're going to produce and that it's going to be of high quality, right? So enough risk for it to be interesting, but not so much risk that the panelist says, I can't judge them as a video artist because they only have still photography. Okay, I think that's a long answer to a short question. The
I have
next
another
one.
question relating back to panel assessments and how we organize proposals as we receive them. The question is how we assess interdisciplinary artists whose application bridges work in multiple areas.
Well, whoever that person is needs to write in the chat right now what interdisciplinary means to you, because that word is very hazy. So if it means that you do poetry and dance, then it's not a problem because that's going to be the same set of panelists that review you in performing arts. But if you're interdisciplinary between music and fashion, that's really problematic in this grant competition because design goes to one set of panelists and music goes to another. So I need to hear from that person what fields they think they're interdisciplinary in, and have them tell us what the end product is, right?
Yeah.
Because if I am a musician who's also a fashion designer, I may have to choose, or I may have to say, well, in the end, I want the work to be on mannequins in the gallery. And therefore, I can lessen all the conversation about music because it's not as important as the end product, which is going to be a new line of design fashion that's going to be in a gallery. So think backwards from what the end product is and focus on telling the panelists, picking the panelists that you want to review that project. So I don't know, does someone put more in the chat, Ben, about what
No
interdisciplinary?
feedback at the moment, but I think that general response is very helpful.
Yeah, I
Um,
think you said, again, people need to understand that interdisciplinary is fine if it's between sculpture and painting or something like that, or between architecture and sculpture, or between poetry and fiction, right? But
yeah,
once you go between two categories like music and painting, then all of a sudden we're at a loss because that's almost like two proposals to two different sets of experts.
great.
All right,
Um,
next.
Also, Joe, you highlighted earlier some of the constraints that we are working with in terms of what the finished product can be, in terms of what can fit in the gallery, what can be presented on the stage. This question is regarding whether or not we would have the ability to present video and art and film, multi-channel work, or complexities related to that, or would the artist need to be prepared to provide the equipment to present that kind of work?
The answer is maybe. And again, you should, if that's what you're going to do next in your career, you should apply and tell us that is your next project. We don't know until we read all the proposals how many other people would apply to do a similar thing. We have the capability in the Los Angeles Municipal Art Gallery to have a small room with, a door and put a projector in there. The trouble comes when the panel selects 3 people to do that because we don't have 3 projectors. So the answer is we have the capabilities to show most kind of art. And if not, we will help you adjust. So in the case of the panelists choosing 3 video makers, we would basically go and rent 2 more projectors and split the costs between the 3 artists. We want to present everyone equally, but we don't own 3 projectors.
Okay. I have a pair of questions, Joe, that kind of relates to what we were buying in terms of the premiere of new work. We have some questions here. Is it okay to have shown or show work in progress photos of the project on social media? And does this mean I can't show any of my work in other shows for 8 months?
No. So if we come to your studio and you told us you're working on these blue abstract paintings, that's great. That's what we're going to be looking at. If you have other work in the studio that you're working on for a gallery or a museum show or a thematic competition, just don't show us that work, because we're focused on the work you're doing for us that is for the premiere. So that's the first thing, which is your career goes on, you do as many things as you can do. The deal here is that the city wants to be the premier. So if you've already shown the work on social media and you've already shown it to the public, it pops the balloon. We're not, no one's going to come to a show if they have already seen the work. So just think about the fact that we're asking you to produce new work that has never been shown before. We are premiering that for the public. And after that, it is your intellectual property. Then you can go show it in other places, sell it to collectors. Let's say you do 5 musical scores and you add 2 more later and make an album. Totally fine with us. It's your intellectual property after we have the right to premiere it. But we don't want to hear that you played portions of it on your social media feed, because it basically creates a situation where the premiere isn't a true premiere.
Okay. A couple more questions. This is relating to the interdisciplinary topic. One example that was proposed is a printmaker and one who is also an art book maker.
It's the same panel, not a problem.
Not a problem. How about a project that is scaled to probably exceed an $8,000 or $10,000 budget with a plan to raise funds elsewhere? Is that allowable, or would DCA prefer to be the sole funder of a new work, of the premiere of the new work?
It's a very big risk to tell us about a project that you can't afford and that you don't already have the extra money for. So I would say save that for another opportunity. It's a huge, the government is very risk adverse. So Ben and I are probably the most progressive people in the city, and we like to believe in artists and their dreams. But if we're giving you $10,000 and tell us in the proposal that you have to raise 50 more to do this giant metallic sculpture, we're already worried that you're not going to be able to do it in time. With 8 months, you really have to be producing the work. You shouldn't be out fundraising. So I would say, again, my advice always is KIS, keep it simple. And the simplest things to do here are the better things.
Okay. I have a couple questions regarding the intro statement and artistic samples, but I think it's worth going over that section next before
Yes.
it be addressed.
If there's no other questions about that are exterior to those, let's go to the forms.
That's right.
All right. So the cover sheet is very self-explanatory. We have to know where your legal name, not your artist name, where you reside, which is where you pay taxes, your mailing address, city, state, zip, phone number, alternative phone number, email, website address, and ramp ID if you have one already. If you don't, just put in a bunch of zeros or nothing. So the next part is you confirm that you understand what you're applying for, that you have customized your resume, that you are proposing grant outcomes that can be done on $6,000 to $7,000, that you understand that you have approximately 4 months to make work and show it to us at numerous times, and that if you're a multidisciplinary artist, that you've defined yourself to the one practice you're applying for. So down below, you see artistic discipline. This is where you choose the first set of panelists to review your work. So in the case of the printmaker, artist, bookmaker, that's visual design. They're both, that person doesn't really have a dilemma, even though they consider themselves interdisciplinary. They're interdisciplinary between two forms of art. So they're just going to check visual design and move on, and then tell us what they're going to produce. And if it's a mixture of prints and books, fine with us. Again, you can only check one box here. So this is where you move from multidisciplinary to the one thing you're applying for where you want to compete. The next part down below is the city council district where you live. If you live inside the city of Los Angeles, hopefully you know your city council district. And if you don't, you should go to this website, neighborhoodinfo.lacity.gov, and you should type in your address and it'll tell you all about where you live. So I did that right now and went to neighborhoodinfo.lacity.gov and I typed in my home address. It would tell me in Council District 13 that Hugo Soto Martinez is my council person, that my garbage is picked up on Thursdays, and that my, county supervisor is so and so. So it's going to tell you everything about where you live. If you live within the LA region, you may still apply to this grant. So let's say you live in Inglewood or Malibu or West Hollywood. These are separate cities than the city of LA. So we will then be looking for evidence on your resume that you have a connection to the city of LA, that you've shown in galleries or museums or performed in spaces that's inside the city of LA. So it's not a deal breaker if you don't belong to one of the city council districts, but if you do, it's a good thing for us to know up front because we have 16 bosses, 15 council members, and a mayor. Next page, please. Specialization in your field. So this is where you're thinking about the panelists, you're thinking about their 300 proposals that come to them in alphabetical order, and you're thinking about how much nicer it's going to be for them to separate people out. So if you are a printmaker, put that in the discipline. If you are a photographer, put that in the discipline. If you are a musician, put it in the discipline. It's really important for the panelists to be able to read apples against apples and oranges against oranges. It helps them make the best decisions. They are aggravated by proposals that say things like interdisciplinary here because they don't know what that means. And then nextly, describe your work. So under music, you can say, I'm a composer and trombonist. I compose music for trombone, or I make prints and artist books, or I make full-length documentary films. Whatever that is, it helps them understand your specialization within the field that you've described above. And then they really know how to compare yellow delicious apples against yellow delicious apples, and they can organize their reading so that they have the best stream of confidence that they are catching all the goodness. Then you certify down below that this is your proposal, your one and only, and you go to the next page where you really start the first person narrative. So you introduce yourself with an authentic, generative statement that complements your artistic practice. So we let you choose the style that you want in 900 words. Again, this is expository and it's your explanation of your career to an objective observer. Please don't use promotional language. Please don't quote other people. Please don't, if it's an interview because you're a shy person and you don't know how to talk about yourself as an artist, then we understand the interview format. But really the best thing is a first person explanation. This is who I am. This is where I was educated. These are my inspirations. This is what I've accomplished in the last 15 years. You'd be surprised at how much this helps somebody read a resume because they immediately understand what you think is most important, rather than reading a resume where everything's chronological nothing's in bold, and they don't really understand what's the best, right? So this is where you talk about that. It can be philosophical, it can be a little humorous. We certainly don't mind you being a little whimsical if it indeed your work is whimsical. But think about this as the elevator speech you give somebody about who you are and what you've accomplished in your career. And
So a
then,
follow, sorry,
yep, go ahead.
follow-up question regarding that intro text, Joe. Should you discuss your recent accomplishments within the last 5 years only, or over the last 15 years?
I think 15 years is too much in 900 words. I don't think that the panelists are really interested in the jumping off point for your next project. And unless you're reaching back in your career to something you did 10 years ago and reviving it, there really is no reason to tell us about something you did 10 years ago. Um, I think the idea here is that you're showing them the springboard from which you're moving to the next part of your career. And I find it hard to understand why stuff that you did 15 years ago is important in this section. I may be wrong, like I said, if you're going back to an earlier theme or an earlier topic, but generally speaking, I would say the past 5 years is plenty.
Okay. Maybe this kind of relates to the introductory text also, Joe. On the cover page, we invite artists to provide their website. The question is, will panelists be referring to my website if I provide it?
Uh, Panelists will sometimes review the websites as a last element when they're trying to figure out something that's a puzzle. So if a panelist goes to your website, it's for two reasons. One, they want to employ you after the panel is over because they see something important in your work. And second of all, they are confused by something and they want to sort it out. So the website's important, but not that important, because the more important thing is the samples you choose to show us as part of the proposal.
Yeah.
The panelists do not have time to surf everyone's website. It's not going to be the place from which they generate their scores.
Yeah, put another way, we don't instruct panelists to do that, but they are.
No, it's really a place they go when they're overly excited and want to meet you, or confused and they don't know, and they're hoping that your website will straighten out a question. All right, so the next part is where you estimate. So again, 80 points is based on what you've accomplished. So keep in mind that question number 1 in your resume is 80 points. That's where you want to put your emphasis. That's why I'm telling you, not if you're a performer, a theater person, you don't want to just go clip a bunch of quotes from other people that says something like, 5 stars, entertainment tonight. 10 stars, entertainment, today. That doesn't help the panelists. It really doesn't. It doesn't do anything for them if it's just a bunch of random things that are fit together. Unless your work's about randomness, in which case they may think it's funny. But quite honestly, 80 points for question number 1. And then you get to question number 2, where you talk about what you're going to do between October and April in this very specific period, paying yourself about $6,000 to $7,000. It depends on how much money you need for materials. So if you're making a very expensive sculpture, you're going to have $6,000. If you're making poetry and you just need a pencil, you're going to can pay yourself $10,000. It just depends, right? So this is where you AIS, keep it simple. You tell us what you're going to do that's going to fit in our gallery or fit on a stage. It does not need to be a whole work. It could be one set of thematic paintings or 4 chapters of a new novel or a 20-minute excerpt from a new theater piece. This is where you describe to them what you're going to produce on that amount of money, the theme, the expectation, the visualization of what the panelists can envision that the city is buying from you, that is solo and uh, in the trajectory of your career, is most important, not something that's a step to the side, not something that is circling back to something that doesn't seem new, but really sort of something that moves you to the next level. So put put in your time here to talk about what it is that you're going to do that is operational yet feasible, is what I would say. And know that this is only 20 points and that you don't have to sweat it, because this isn't necessarily going to make or break your proposal. It's already been made of with your introduction to yourself and your resume, because that's what matters most to the panelists. Let's go to the next section. Helps people me to say it multiple times. It's not an ideas competition. You can have the best idea in the whole world, but if there are other people who have a longer, more prestigious career, you still may not get selected. So here's where you upload your resume that you've customized for us, that you've made short enough so the panelists don't have to do extra reading. And here's where you go to the artistic documentation. Now, this is very important that you upload the stuff that you want us to see and nothing else, that you choose the videos and the images that you want, that you put the best things first. So if I'm a musician and I'm showing you 2 clips, video clips, I'm going to put my best work for a trombone first, where I'm the soloist and I'm clearly the guy. And then I'm going to put a second work later where I have background musicians, but I'm still the soloist. And I'm going to know that I'm promoting myself as a composer of trombone. I'm showcasing myself and not a group. I'm showcasing something recent that I'm very proud of, and that those are real-time clips that the panelists can use to judge me on my creativity and my talent. And again, I'm going to put the best one first, even if it's maybe not the most recent one, because I want to hit them over the head with greatness right away. I don't want them to be looking down at their score sheet and taking notes in the 4th or 5th minute and missing the best one, right? Same with samples. If you're showing us samples, give us those iconic things you've made in the past 2 or 3 years first, and then show us the context of the work. If you are showing us installation work, you have the added disadvantage of figuring out how to show us an overview of an installation and then a couple of intimate places within the installation that gives the mood of the overall thing. So if you make very complicated installations, you may only be able to show us 2 or 3 at the most, because you're going to have to show multiple images of the same thing. That's how it works with, again, how our system is really set up for that simpler is better in this particular category. Any questions about the artistic documentation, Ben?
Yes, a couple of requests for strategies on how to select what to post. So here's one instance of an artist who has several projects that she started studies for, one of which is painting. Her recent work samples are mostly works on paper with charcoal and some watercolor. Does she need to provide samples related to the project proposed?
Yes, everything relates to the project. We are a project funder. So if you say that you're going to deliver 10 new watercolors for the money, then going backwards, you would show us watercolors in your artistic samples and nothing else. We don't need to see concept drawings. We don't need to see anything except for comparable works.
Okay. I have another question from a literary artist, as Michelle, asking what the best formatting for presenting written work in this digital space. She has filmed readings of the work and interviews where she reads her work. So can she create a 3 to 5 minute video reel? What is the best manner of presentation?
Yes. So in our world, literary artists are presented live on a stage, and the best things for the panelists to get are videos of you reading the poetry, so they can hear your voice and see the intonations of the poetry. Again, think about this for any grant that you apply for. If panelists are reading at home, and they've got 300 proposals at 20 pages each, sending them poetry on a page is not the best strategy, because they're already reading too much. They love the opportunity to look away from the computer, from the written word on the computer, and see something live. It gives them joy to see you reading the work. So I would say video is always the best strategy for poets, unless you're a poet and a graphic designer and your work is designed as a specific shape or form on the page of paper. Then you have no choice but to show us the graphic designs of your poetry on a printed page.
Yeah, great. No additional questions, but I'll add, what's not shown on this preview is if you do go the route of providing links, you'll have an opportunity to, of course, enter the URLs, but there will also be a box where you could enter some notes. Very important, for example, if you have password protected videos, if you are going to do that, that's a place to provide those essential credentials. And please ensure that those links are good to go at least through February of 2025, because panelists may not be reading it or clicking on it until then. We've come across dilemmas in the past where panelists are attempting to view videos that just no longer worked, and we don't have the opportunity to get back to you as the applicant to fix that. As well as there's a note here on the guidelines that panelists typically spend around 3 to 5 minutes on these artistic samples. So be very thoughtful about the length of the videos you're providing. If indeed you're including a longer video clip, it's important to use that contextual field to advise the panelists what time, give them a start time and end time, so they're seeing exactly what it is you want them to see.
Yeah, it's always good to explain those things and nothing else. Like start at 1 minute 40 seconds and watch to 3 minutes 20 seconds.
Yeah.
There's a question that came through about can you submit JPEGs and videos, and the answer is you can upload whatever you want, but it should be relevant to the category. So if indeed you're an installation artist and you're showing us 5 photos of your installation from 3 years ago, we really don't want you to then have a video clip of you walking through the next installation. You should just choose one modality and stick with it and make sure that it's the one that best describes your work. Video for us is for things that are kinetic, that move or have sound. It's not an opportunity for visual artists to pan through an exhibition and to slip 10 works into one clip instead of showing us 10 individual images. So just be clear again that there's a purpose to the madness here, and it is because panelists like to see that you have a standard way of explaining your work and not um, and not um, and not jumping around in a sense to sort of um, again sort of cheat the system. Trust me, they're gonna know exactly what you do after the first 2 images or the first 2 minutes. These are expert arts managers.
Okay. I'll scroll next to the supplemental items. Pretty straightforward preview there.
Yeah, the supplemental material, again, you can choose 3. You do not need to choose 3. So if you have a great letter of recommendation and a lukewarm review, you might want to